So today we're going to be reviewing a plugin called Dehancer, which actually takes your digital image and gives it more film-like characteristics. And I've been playing with Dehancer for the last 3 weeks or so when they reached out to me, and I've actually used it on a couple of projects already. And I love the look that I'm getting out of my digital images by using Dehancer. So without further ado, let's dive into the plugin. I'm going to give you guys a quick run through on how it works and how I think it can benefit you guys in the future. So if you look here, I've already laid out a simple node tree, and this is kind of the node tree that I'm typically working with. I don't always use all of the nodes. Sometimes I add some, sometimes I take away some, but this is kind of where I start. And I always shoot all my images in log. So first off is what I did is I took my log image from C-Log2 and converted it into the Davinci wide gamut color space. This is just going to give me more flexibility when it comes to color grading my images. And then I converted it back from Davinci wide gamut to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, which is what most of our screens are calibrated to and what we watch on a daily basis. So this is where a majority of the grading is going to happen, is in between the two CSTs here in this Davinci color space. And then at the end, we are going to put Dehancer as like the finishing touch to kind of give us those filmic characteristics that a lot of us are striving for. So you can see if my CSTs are off, this is the image that we started with, a very flat log image. And if I turn these on, now we're kind of in that neutral, like straight out of camera, Rec 709 color space. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually not going to start with Dehancer. I am going to kind of dial in the exposure, my white balance or saturation if I need that, and then my tonal curve. Now you can actually do pretty much all of this inside of Dehancer if you want to on one node, but this is how I've learned to color grade, and I kind of like doing it this way and then adding Dehancer at the end with some final finishing touches. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my HDR, my exposure node, and make sure that this is in Davinci wide gamut and Gamma 2. Or not Gamma, Davinci intermediate. This is going to give me an accurate adjustment when I'm using this exposure tab. And I'm just going to bring this down because it's a little bright right now. And we'll go to there for now. If we need to come back and make adjustments, we will. My white balance, it is a little bit on the warm side, but the sun is coming through, so I'm actually okay with that. Let me just play this through. Let's go to here where there's not a sun flare. This is going to give us a more accurate representation. Yeah, I think it's a little coolish green, but also it was kind of dark, and this is the shadow side because you would kind of expect that. So I'm going to kind of leave that there. I'm going to mess with my curve a little bit. I like to use my editable splines. This is going to give me a really nice organic curve. And I like to lift my shadows a little bit. Kind of pull that down to there for now. And then I like to pull down my highlights and kind of push them up. And I'll go back to my shadows. And if we turn that off and back on, you can kind of see what that did. Okay. And then now I'm going to go into my Dehancer node. So let me go in here, my effects, drag this over. Let's do this, move this down here a little bit. And I'm going to take my Dehancer, drag it onto there, and I'm going to choose the source. This is kind of like using a CST. I'm going to use Davinci wide gamut Rec 709 because we are in Rec 709 now because we are after this CST here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the film grain because it is really strong in the beginning. I want to see my image for what it is. And then I'm going to pick my film. So they have a ton of different film stocks you can choose through in here. And for this one, I'm actually going to use, I think, Kodak Portra 400 or 800. Let's use 400 for now. Cinestill is, where's Cinestill at? Or not Cinestill. Which one is it? Kodak Vision 3 is really popular in Hollywood, so these are ones you could use as well. Ooh, that 250D. You know what? I changed my mind. I'm going to use 250D, and this is what it looked like before, and this is after, and we're going to play around with the colors and stuff a little bit as well, but this is the film stock I'm going to choose for now. So this is your input tab, and you can choose to adjust your exposure from here, your temperature, so you can make it cooler or warmer, your tint control, which can make it greener or more magenta. And then if you enable defringing, this is for like chromatic aberrations and stuff in your camera. I'm not going to mess with that for now. And then if you go into your film developer, you can enable this, and you can actually mess with your contrast for the image, gamma, all of those things. I personally don't really use this. I would rather do this before this node most of the time. So I'm going to disable that for now, and I'm going to close these down. We already got our film print, so we're going to leave that. This is film compression, so I do use this. So if you enable this, you can see if you look up into the sky, especially over in here, if you enable this, this is going to compress your highlights, and this helps give it more of those filmic characteristics because film has a natural roll-off in the highlights. So you can adjust this. You can choose the impact of it, and if you can see how much it affects the image. If you go to the right or to the left, the highlights are a little bit more prominent. If you move it to the right, it kind of compresses those a little bit more. So let's adjust the white point first, which this is going to adjust how much of the highlights are affected and what that white point is. So imagine like your curve, you can either raise or lower it, and you're creating it like either raising the white point to where there's more of the highlights affected, or you can lower it and then you're compressing the highlights even more. So let's bring that there. And let's disable that, enable it. And you can see how much more detail we've got on this side of the sky. So that's disabled, and that's enabled. We've brought back some more detail and kind of crushed those highlights a little bit, giving it more of a smoother, softer look. And then if we go into this expand tab, this controls your black point. So if I move it to the left, you can see that it's becoming more washed out because I'm actually lifting the black point of my image. Let's reset that. And then if I do the white point, you can either see it's going to brighten the image like crazy, or you can bring it down like that. So I'm going to reset that for now. I actually think, let's turn that off, turn that back on. Let's leave that around there for now. And then you can choose your film print. So they got Cineon, Filmlog, Fujifilm, Kodak 2383, and then Kodak Endura Glossy Paper. 2383 is a super popular print film emulation. So we're going to do that one today. And then this, you can choose your warmth, like in the highlights, like in your whites. So if I pull this to the left, you can see that the image warmed up, especially over in this area. If I pull it back this way, it kind of cools it down. So I'm going to leave that there for now. We can adjust the exposure in this tab as well for that film print. So if we bring this up, because it darkened it quite a bit, we can bring back some of that exposure as well. And this is your contrast. I'm going to leave that there for now. And then this is your color density. So this is going to take your colors. So you can see it's going to make those colors a little bit more deeper or rich. And I'm going to leave the color density all the way up. And then you can adjust your saturation. If I pull this out, it's going to take all the saturation out of the image. I'm going to leave that at 100% for now. And then this is your analog range limiter. I'm personally Going to leave that off. This is your color head, and this is where you can adjust the colors. So you can shift it more towards yellow. Let's turn it on real quick. Enable that. You can shift it more toward yellow or blue, magenta, green, cyan, red, and so on and so forth. And then you also have your shadow, midtones, and highlights. So this is going to adjust the colors specifically in the shadows or your midtones or the highlights. So if you want to adjust those specifics, you have a little bit more granular control there. And this is your preserve exposure tab. So if when you're adjusting your saturation and things like that, if you have this off, it can actually brighten or darken the image when you're adjusting those colors with the saturation. And you don't really, I mean, you could, but I personally would rather only the colors be affected, not the brightness or darkness of the image. So I leave that at 100. And then you have your impact and this. So if I move this, this is kind of like your opacity for it. So if you pull this all the way down, everything that we just did here is gone. And if we take that up, then it's going to bring back more of what we did. But for right now, I'm going to leave the color head where it's at. This is your film grain. And honestly, this is where I think Dehancer kind of shines, is with the film grain, the halation, and the bloom. So if we turn on the film grain, you can see how much that added. I personally think that's a little too much, at least for the style of shooting that I do. And for this specific image, I am going to go with this 65mm ISO 50. And if we zoom in here, you can see the grain that it added. Let me disable it. If I disable it, that's disabled, and that's enabled. And it gives it a nice filmic grain without being too much. If we zoom out here, I'll disable it again and then enable it. I think it gives it a nice soft grain. And then if we go to halation, so halation basically is the red artifacting you're going to get between your most contrasty part of your images. So if I turn mask mode on, you can see on here, these are the parts of the images that are being affected. So if we zoom in, if you watch on the outline of here on her arm and like these leaves, if I turn this off and back on, you get like a red glow on the image. And I personally think that might be a little too much, so I'm going to go to the 65mm, turn that mask mode back on, and you can see where it's been affecting. So we're going to leave that like that. And then you have your bloom. Now this is going to create blooming in your highlights. And you can see if I turn this off and back on, it's going to create that nice subtle bloom on your highlights. Now I think that's actually a little too much as well, so I'm going to change it to 65mm. This is going to give us more of a softer, subtler glow effect. And if I turn this on, you can see what parts of the image it's being affected as well, which is very similar to the halation. So turn that off, turn that back on, and I like the image that we're getting out of that. And then you also have like your film damage, which if I play through, if I scroll through, you'll see like the little black lines and stuff, little artifacts that happen on there. If you really want to give it that old-timey filmic look, you can add that in there. I personally don't really use that. And then you have your vignette, which you can use within this Dehancer node as well if you want to. Let's enable it. And you can kind of see it's going to give your image a vignette. You can either brighten the corners or darken it. And then you can also change the size of it. And then like if we change the feather, here, let's do this first. Let's do the feather. And you can see that little circle. So we want to feather that out normally. And then you can change the exposure. And if we toggle that off and back on, that's going to give us a nice vignette on the image. Personally, I usually use power windows in Davinci Resolve for vignette. But for the sake of this tutorial, we'll leave that on for now. So you can see this is the image that we started with, and this is after our color grade. And you can just see how much more life this image has using those color grading techniques and in association with Dehancer. And Dehancer also has a mobile version of their plugin as well, which you can use to edit photos, videos, things like that. For example, I have this picture of my dog, and if I wanted to edit this photo, I could use the Dehancer app, and then you can go through. They have all these presets, just like in the Resolve version, and you can find one that you like. And then if you find something that you like, you can also go to the edit tab and you can adjust exposure, like the tonal contrast, all of those things, saturation, the color density, all those things. Adjust the Kodak print profile, and they've got these settings down here. Source, the film you can choose from, the developer mode, the print, color head, film grain, all of these things you can also edit inside of the mobile version, which I think is fantastic. So they kind of got you covered if you need a quick little photo or video edited on your phone, or if you're very mobile, or if you do a lot of filming from your phone or something like that, then you don't actually have to use the plugin for Dehancer for a video editing software or photo editing software. You can do it directly from your phone, which I think is really, really cool. And this is what the original photo looked like, and then this is like what an edited version would look like. So if you guys are interested in picking up this plugin, you can use my code Shackert at checkout to receive 10% off of Dehancer. I hope that this kind of gave you an insight of my color grading process and what Dehancer can do for your images. I can't wait to see what you guys create.